Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Should I yell? Okay. Sounds good. Again, thank you for coming to Helena, Montana. Spend your money here. That's my job. I want to thank everybody for coming here to Helena to speak to us and to get together to talk about where we are and where we're going. I'm going to jump right back to thank our membership group. I want to definitely thank Tony Snyder and Paul Reichert for being the chairman to help us pull this together. Again, we're coming off of a pandemic. We didn't know how hybrid we were going to be. So I'm quite happy to see everybody here this morning. Northwestern Energy, Montana Department of Commerce, or membership groups, Montana Youth Apprentice, MyApp, and Newfields. Bronze sponsors were MDT, Small Business Enterprise Program, KLJ, Montana Cooperative Development Center, Cushing-Terrell, and Mission West. Conference sponsors, Bozeman Economic Development, Staley Engineering, MDT, or Montana DEQ, Montana West Economic Development, Prospera, Butte Local Development, Big Sky Economic Development, Zula Economic Development, Sweetgrass, Part of the Rockies, and WWC. So, good morning. What I did want to do is quickly bring Cheryl down to speak to us from Senator Tester. And then we have another speaker in a minute. Cheryl, do you want to try that?
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I haven't had enough coffee this morning to do this. And it's been a while since I've had the opportunity to speak in front of anybody, quite frankly. So it's good to be here today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Cheryl Ulmer. I am Senator Tester's Regional Director in Great Falls. I work on his economic development issues. And so I do a lot of traveling in the state. Some of you I've met. I've been involved with MEDA for, gosh, I don't know, probably 20 years. My world before John was economic development as well. I worked for the same agency that Brett Doney does, and Montana Cooperative Development Center. So it's always fun to come and be able to see friendly faces. I have a prepared message from the senator, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to. I hate standing up here reading from a piece of paper. Obviously, you know, the senator's work has been lately on ARPA, and then of course his involvement as one of the very critical people involved in the negotiations on the upcoming infrastructure package, which is huge. It's going to bring great things to Montana. We know that. Roads, bridges, broadband. With as much broadband money that's going to be out there between ARPA and the infrastructure, I think we're going to see great things happen in Montana, and that's what the senator's looking for, and is excited about that. Over the next few weeks, they're hoping to get a lot completed on the infrastructure package as it moves forward to the Senate. He's going to be very involved in shepherding that through. They'd love to see something get completed before recess. We'll see if that happens. You know what Washington, D.C. is like. So excited to see that move forward. One of the things I would like to stress to all of you is, as much as I follow MEDA and what Gloria is so great about posting on MEDA, on the emails that we receive, it's really important for us to know what y'all are working on. And when the senator has to get on the floor and push to make something happen for Montana, having examples of how that's happening in Montana is great information for us to have. And it's great for him to have on the floor to be able to speak specific to projects that are happening. Also, when we're in a community near you or in your community, knowing what you're working on so I can make sure that the senator gets to see what you're doing is also important. So I'm in the directory. Please email me, call me if you have any questions or any concerns. I love to pass that back to the senator. Been working a lot with Jason, with MACO, about the ARPA funding and how the counties and communities are working with those funds and doing our best to help them understand the crazy information we keep getting from Treasury. So I'm here. I was here yesterday. However I can help, please feel free to email, call. the senator appreciates,
Oh,
obviously,
the
all the
minister's coming. I think she forgot.
knows that you are the individuals that make it happen on the ground. And our communities moving, building jobs, retaining jobs. So thank you for all that you do. Appreciate it.
We want to make sure we have a lot of new faces here. That's the one thing that is great about living in Montana is you have direct access to your representatives and your senators. It is something that it isn't uncommon to walk through Costco and actually run into John or to Steve. It's one of those things that is an asset that we have. These are the people that you need to contact. Just if you have a question, you have an idea, make sure they understand what's going on. For those who are kind of new to this, this is one of the assets that we have over almost any other state. And now I'd like to introduce Marissa Stockton, who is going to talk to us from Representative Rosendale's office. Are you okay with this?
Good morning. I hope everyone can hear me. I have a quiet voice, so I'll try and speak loudly. My name is Marissa, and I'm the state director for Congressman Rosendale, and it's a pleasure to be here. The congressman sends his greetings, wishes he could be here, but is back in DC right now. So it's an honor to be invited to speak with you all as influential economic leaders in our community that are helping to shape the future and stability of our economy. I'm committed to Montana, and most importantly, making sure Montana is setting the example for the rest of the country on how we can get our economy back on track. And I think Montana is doing a really good job. 2020 was really difficult for our economy, but we're seeing it bounce back. It's still in its infancy, and I know that you guys are at the heart of bringing it back on track. I think we get around the corner of the pandemic. We're on track with all kinds of things, especially in Montana, with our economy and all the things moving forward. And I just hope that at the federal level, we can copy that because I think Montana is a good example. So please know that I understand the importance of all your work. Your contribution as community leaders is incredibly important to our integrity and reliability of our local communities. And you play a key role in keeping Montana at the forefront of our positive economic outgrowth. So thank you. Feel free to get in touch with our office at any time. We are paying attention to all of the ARPA funds and how they're being distributed, and happy to help with any of those things. So thank you very much, and have a nice day.
One of the big things that you would notice when we were starting this, and Steve was kind of talking about it and Joey yesterday, is we brought in some of our partners to really look at how do we move the dial, how do we lean into it, as Steve will say. And one of those major contributors, I'm trying to make sure that Todd's here, there he is the executive director for the Montana Chamber of Commerce. He walked in the door on cue. So I want to welcome Todd O'Hare to talk to you about kind of the collaboration and where you see the Chamber and MEDA moving forward.
I interject something really quick while we have our congressional delegation staffers in the room. I'm sorry, James is not ready to leave the here, but we've gone through an unprecedented year in the history of our country and the world. I don't know about your communities, but mine wouldn't have survived without fast action from Congress. What we saw coming out of DC to help our communities, I know we moved one of our banks without 1,300 loans of those only 2 businesses. It's really impressive what leaders did. I know James Fortman's team is here, and they can express gratitude to whether you're in Congress or at the state level. We saw leaders come together to do things for our community that the likes of which we haven't seen in a long time. I think we should take a second to press on that.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Well, my name is Todd O'Hare, and I'm the president and CEO of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also the executive director of the Montana Chamber Foundation, our 501c3 of the Montana Chamber. And Steve Arviskow and Gloria asked me to kind of come and say a few words about kind of some of the efforts the Montana Chamber has been under. And I think a lot of it is due to the fact that the Montana Chamber of Commerce went through a very similar exercise to what MEDA has just accomplished. And prior to 2016, we didn't have a strategic plan. And I think that the Montana Chamber was primarily a reactionary sort of an organization. You know, when it comes to legislative activity in the annual or in the biennial legislative session, we'd evaluate, and I wasn't at the chamber at the time, but they would evaluate bills as they came forward and determine whether or not this was a bill they wanted to support or a bill that they wanted to oppose. And so we were primarily a reactionary organization and playing a lot of defense. And so in 2015, you know, the decision was made, and I was on the chamber board at the time, the decision was made that we need a strategic plan to address the Montana economy. And how can we take the Montana economy from a relatively poor performer, kind of bottom of the quarter percentile of other states, kind of muddling along for all these years, and reach our full potential. And so much like MEDA did, we contracted with a consulting firm that was an expert in helping organizations like the Montana Chamber develop a strategic plan. Their individual essentially moved to Montana for about a year and started meeting with businesses all over the state, all different aspects of the business community, agriculture, natural resources, tech, service, to try to determine, you know, what it was that the Montana Chamber of Commerce should focus on. And so in 2016, the chamber unveiled its first ever strategic plan. We call it Envision 2026 because it's a 10-year strategy. And the business leaders that we engaged with during that period of time essentially told us that we need to raise the average minimum wage in Montana, or not the minimum wage, but the average income level in Montana. We need to increase our gross state product. We need to have the fastest growing in the top 10, the fastest growing wage growth in the country. And those were sort of the goals that we wanted to strive for over the following 10 years. And then from that, there were 4 pillars that were identified that in order to accomplish that average median wage growth and the average median income in the state and the gross state product, in order to accomplish that. And that was infrastructure, focusing on infrastructure as something that we should be focused on, make sure that, you know, we can grow a Montana economy. And that's including kind of your traditional infrastructure of roads, bridges, waterways. It's expanded to include some broadband as well, recognizing that the Montana economy is rapidly changing. Business climate, which entails everything from a tax climate to a regulatory climate, a judicial climate that's predictable and reasonable for employers to be able to operate in. Workforce development was our third pillar that was identified, right? This was an issue, you know, that's been facing Montana for years and years now, right? And I think, you know, over the last 18 months, I think we've seen like an urgency and almost a crisis settling in Montana as far as workforce development. So that was our third pillar. And then our fourth pillar was entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship was kind of identified as a strength of the state of Montana, right? We've consistently ranked near the top of other states as an entrepreneurial state. And so how do we maintain that? How do we keep that entrepreneurial edge that Montana has? And so those were the 4 pillars that make up the strategic plan of the Montana Chamber of Commerce. And obviously, I think the challenge is where do you focus? Because I think if you look at any one of those 4 pillars, any one of them is frankly a full-time job, right? I mean, if the Montana Chamber, if the only thing we focused on was business climate, tax reform, regulatory reform, legal climate, right? That in and of itself is a massive undertaking and a big sort of an effort. And so I started at the Montana Chamber in my current role in April of 2019. And when I came on board, I said, you know, the thing that we have to do as an organization is we have to tighten our focus. We can't afford to be an inch deep and a mile wide. We've got to tighten our focus. We've got to identify what it is as an organization that we do better than any other organization. and then pour our resources into that. Identify our lane and own that lane. And once we get so that we feel like we own that lane, then we can start to widen the lane. And it's easy to be distracted in different ways and be pulled in different directions, but that's what we decided we needed to do. It's like, we need to really tightly focus. We need to constrict what it is we're going to focus on. We're going to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves to us. We're going to accomplish what we can accomplish, not what we would just like to accomplish, but what's the art of the possible. And so,
Sorry.
it's all right. I thought there was some background music. So that's what we decided to do. We really wanted to focus on where it is we're going to focus our efforts. And so so we started introducing our own pieces of legislation that were pretty narrowly focused. So this last legislative session that we just came out of, we went into this session more aggressive than we've ever gone into a legislative session. We had 4 priority bills the Montana Chamber identified, crafted, formed coalitions around, and pushed through the legislature and was able to get the governor's signature on. They were big pieces of legislation, but that was our focus, was those 4 pieces of legislation. They were related to tort reform primarily. And so when I started, the big challenge that I thought that we were facing was, what do you do in the workforce development arena? Right? I mean, it felt like our strength was in kind of a business climate, because Montana Chamber had always been, you know, a heavyweight in the legislative process when it comes to issues related to taxes and regulations. But in workforce, you know, where do you focus your efforts on workforce? And because as we looked at it, the workforce challenge is a whole bunch of different components, depending on who you talk to and depending on where they're located. You know, Grant Keir and I were talking about it yesterday that, you know, in Missoula, you know, affordable housing has always been an issue in Missoula, but it was one of 3 or 4 sort of issues. Now it's number 1. And so you have issues related to workforce development, related to affordable housing, access to childcare. We had employers telling us they couldn't find employees that would pass a criminal background check. So you had all these different components under workforce development, and recognizing that, you know, we've got to narrow our lane. We got to focus on what it is that we do better than anybody else, and we'll support these other efforts, but we're going to focus our efforts. We ultimately surveyed our members and surveyed a lot of other businesses and came out with what we felt like was going to be the lane that we were going to operate on. And that ultimately is that employability skills, particularly in the K through 12, as they come out of 12th grade or the higher university system, that employers are telling us that they don't have critical thinking skills, they don't have problem solving skills, they don't know how to work in teams, they don't know what it's like to show up to work on time, what a full workday looks like. And so we're taking that and we're focusing on the employability skills in the K through 12 system and in the higher education system. And so that's what we're really focused on in workforce development. And so I would encourage you, because I think MEDA has a similar challenge to the Montana Chamber in the sense that you've got this great report and there's a lot of information in it. And if you try to do it all, you'll do none of it. And we've decided that, you know, we have to really focus on what it is that we can accomplish. And, you know, Governor Gianforte is kind of famous for making the statement that, oh, we're going to do some accomplishments in the state in 3- and 5-year plays. And that's kind of the way we want to do things too. It's like we want to accomplish what's the art of the possible at any given moment. We want to go as far as we possibly can, go widen our lane as we can. But we're going to really focus our efforts in the meantime. And trust me, it's challenging to get pulled in and steered into some different directions. But I'm convinced that for us as an organization, that, you know, that we can't do it all. And we're going to try to focus our limited resources that we have on very narrow lanes and very focused vision. The second thing that I would say is that, you know, one of the things that we've recognized too at the Montana Chamber of Commerce is that, you know, we have to look for ways to be able to own certain pieces of our strategic plan. after the 2015 legislature adjourned without an infrastructure investment package for the first time in anyone's memory, Montana Chamber said, you know, given our infrastructure state in the state, we can't afford even one session where the legislature and the governor doesn't invest in infrastructure. And so we recognized this was a big problem. You had a Republican legislature and you had a Democratic governor, competing priorities for budgetary issues that they could never resolve. And so after failing to pass an infrastructure investment package in 2015, in 2017, we passed one. And it was a significant infrastructure investment because it required raising the gas tax in Montana the first time since 1993. And we were able to get that done in a Republican legislature with the Democratic governor, recognizing that we had to work with those folks that would work with us. We had to come up with the art of the possible, and we were able to get that across the legislature and into the governor's hands. And so Steve and I talked to Steve Arvscow and I, we talked about this, you know, last year sometime. And one of the things that I would encourage you to consider is that if you don't have an entity that MEDA can invest in order to engage in the legislative process for those issues that were identified in this legislative or in this economic report that you put together. If you don't have an ability to move that with some sort of an executive director or a team of lobbyists, it will not happen. You cannot expect this report to be picked up by a group of legislators and say, man, there's some great stuff in here. We're going to take it and run. That's not the way it's going to happen. And so if you're not willing to try to figure out a way for this organization to be able to create some sort of a mechanism in order to engage actively and proactively in the legislative session, much of this is going to sit on the shelf. It'll be great background fodder for a handful of folks. And so I would encourage you to be able to, you know, find some way to be able to fund some sort of an effort that you can invest in this to move this forward on a proactive instead of a reactionary basis to move this through a legislative sort of a session. And it's the sort of stuff that I think that we're being able to do. Like I said, the Montana Infrastructure Coalition, I give that as an example of one way that we're supporting an effort that's being able to pull these sort of folks together, help us continue our focus on infrastructure. So those were the couple of thoughts that I had that we have gone through, you know, very similar to the MEDA group, and having gone for years without any sort of a strategic plan and then the expense and the time that it took to pull one together and then left with something. And now how do you take it and do more than just, you know, have it as a nice background on a banner or something for a prop in different meetings. So that's been our experience. And like I said, we've got a long ways to go, but we're going to do our best to kind of continue following those kind of two principles to try to enact our strategic plan. So with that, I take any questions. I probably burned up more minutes than I needed. That's good. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate the movement that occurred because of that infrastructure coalition to get that that gas tax to improve was a behemoth lift. And it really wasn't, if it wasn't for that coalition, that would not have happened. Right now, we're going to move on to Director of Montana Department of Commerce, Mr. Scott Osterman. You'll have a couple comments about everything that's going on at Department of Commerce, which directly relates to us.
I thanked Todd for, what Todd said, because I think he left me a minute, so. Perfectly fine with me, so. First of all, I want to thank you on behalf of the Department of Commerce for all the work you do, for all the partnership that we have. I've gotten to know many of you and a little bit, at least in these early stages here. And I appreciate the vision you have. I appreciate the opportunities that you're seeing, but even more so, we appreciate that partnership. And I just want to say that from our team to you, we have great admiration and great respect. And I hope that that is a mutual one and that we work together as a team as well. So, we have in our group, we're going through some changes. We've restructured. And that restructure has been fairly focused on how do we deliver for the state based upon the people we have and the programs that we have. So the novel concept is we aligned form the function with our structure as opposed to having functions fit in other parts of the structure. So we have all of our research people are together, all of our IT people are together, all of our finance people are together, and director's office and Marcom we've kind of rearranged as well. And that's caused maybe a little bit of confusion out there, but internally, we all know what our jobs are now. And we don't have an IT person reporting to a tourism person or whatever it is, right? So that's the first thing when I came in, it's like, I couldn't understand our own structure. How do we function if we're kind of confusing as to who reports to who and why? So that was sort of the first thing that we looked at. And relatively, I mean, my staff's here, so you can ask them, but we went through that relatively painlessly. And so we really have basic pillars that we're working on right now. A new one that we formed was business attraction. And so we're taking the Choose MT website, we're going to migrate that to the business attraction website. So for those of you that have met Frederick, Frederick's our first business attraction hire. This isn't his first rodeo, so fortunately he had the opportunity to move 4,000 jobs out of California to another state, and he's building a house here in Thompson Falls. So just stay where you are down there in California and get the right companies. We'll talk about that. Then we'll also have another person in the Midwest or the Southeast, depending upon the talent that we get. And then we're also opening the Taiwan office again. The Taiwan trade office will open in, technically speaking, tomorrow or the next day, I think. And we'll renew those relationships. So that fundamentally is kind of changing a lot of the landscape of how we've acted, because we've been a reactionary organization for the most part, stimulated well by you, but not a proactive environment. So our business attraction people are out there to recruit and find the right kinds of companies. We'll talk about fit in a minute, but so that's that's the first. Todd talks about his pillars. I'm going through some of our organizational pillars. Business attraction first. That's something that's totally new. Then we have the business development group that you're so familiar with, right? Wayne Johnston and his team working with Big Sky Trust Fund and all these other things that are out there. I mean, this to me actually was kind of interesting. I forgot to bring it with me, but we have this really interesting pamphlet. Has everybody seen the pamphlet? We say, well, what programs do you have? Well, like this, So I looked at that and I said, okay, we haven't done anything yet, but to me, that's a problem, right? Because how do you navigate that? How do you know which thing is the right thing for whomever you're talking to, if it even can be a thing, right? So that to me is functionally, we got to make it simple, right? And we have to make our engagement with companies when they just start clicking on buttons in the internet to be able to click on this and say, you know, we don't want them to go through 27 different pages to try to get to the thing that they might need. So, you know, much to the consternation of our staff, probably, you're going to see some migration as to what our websites look like, even though we just finished migrating from one backend platform to another and spending a whole bunch of money doing that because for whatever reason. And so we get to start it over again. But one of the things that's critical, I think, is to get your feedback. What are the companies asking you when they're trying to figure out, is this a good place to come or not? What do they need to know? We need to align our messages, right? There's one Montana, right? And we got to remember that, right? And yes, you're from all different parts, but a win in Montana is a win for Montana, no matter where it is. We haven't been the kind of state that people necessarily wake up in the morning and say, I want to move to Montana. Until COVID. And so that was one of these great inflectionary moments that I think we have to take advantage of. It's only going to happen once. All this ARPA money is only going to happen once. Hopefully COVID's only going to happen once. If it happens again, we'll probably have to build a fence or something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's been very challenging in a lot of different ways. And so let's take advantage of that, but we need to take advantage of it with some uniformity. And I don't mean everybody looks the same. I mean, we have some of the same basic messages. Because not every company is going to feel right and fit in every part of the state. But we also need to look at it, and this would be my encouragement for you, is that you're regional, but don't be parochial. Does everybody know what I mean by that? Let's take a look at how we work together. And if it comes down to two areas, being the last two for a decision maker, for a site selector, I would hope that the two of you, along with us, are making sure that we've eliminated all of the other sites outside of Montana. So that would be my ask, is that we really look at, we're competing, but we're selling, this is what we have. And then the best fit is the one where the company goes. And it's not one group can throw more money at it than another, or all these other types of things. Because to me, and Frederick would probably tell you this, the amount of money that you offer sometimes is the least important thing. Yet, what's the first thing that we do? Oh, we have this sheet. Right, so I get to go back to that sheet. And this sheet has, we got this program and this program and this program. They might not care. Because if they've already made the emotional decision that they need to move, we need to make sure we're working with them so that this is where they move. With this caveat, if they're a fit for Montana. So the number one is we're one Montana. The number two, this is what the governor ran on. Growth of jobs, $50,000 per year or more. And that doesn't mean we'll only go for those jobs. It just means that if you have that as a target, you're going to fill both directions. And there's an opportunity that can be created there. And then the second thing is keeping our Montana way of life. So that's where the fit part comes. We get to choose the fit. We're no longer a state that has to beg for somebody to come here. So let's be very intentional about that. Frederick and I are looking very clearly, and this is where we want to have a lot of engagement with you, is what type of company brings the greatest value to our area, wherever your area is. What is going to be the biggest needle mover for us? What industry, what service business, whatever it might be, fits our demographic, the type of housing that we have, what creates the greatest amount of benefit with the least amount of stress into the area. And then we will target those companies. We will find those companies, and then people very intentionally, and the other people will very intentionally go after those companies that fit. They'll fit structurally and functionally. They'll fit, bless you. They'll fit, ideologically, because we don't need to replicate what's happened in other parts of the country. That's very important to us. We don't want to preserve our way of life. We don't want to be preserved like a fossil and not move, but we want to preserve what we hold dear. And we hold dear our ability to go out and recreate responsibly and effectively and in any way, shape, or form that we do. We hold our values, right? And those values actually come around in some pretty interesting ways, right? Think about how and why why companies like people from Montana. There are companies that have come and recruited in our universities, and what's one of the first questions they ask? Did you grow up on a farm or a ranch? And what do they know? Why do they ask that question?
Work ethic.
Work ethic. One is work ethic. Work hard, don't stop, because you can't stop until it's done. That's a big difference. I can tell you it doesn't exist necessarily every other part of the country. Right? Second thing. What's the second thing about being from a rural environment? Friendly. Self-starters. Problem solving. Right? You think there's a hailstorm coming. The gear broke on the combine. It's 112 miles to Great Falls. And they may or may not have that gear. What do? You make the gear, right? It gets done some way, shape, or form. Somewhere out there in that environment is some farmer that has a lathe that can, a belt-driven lathe that can go find some piece of scrap metal and make a 112 tooth sprocket and put that thing back on before the storm gets here. I witnessed that. I mean, that was me growing up. And so that's a different mentality. If you're in an urban environment, that mentality is, oh, we'll have to just go to the store and buy one. Or what if the store's out? Oh, it's a different thing. You don't even think about it. That is a key thing that our people have here, right? Admittedly, it makes the OSHA people and other things like that kind of get very nervous about certain things, but it is that get it done and figure out a way to solve the problem mentality. And certainly the last thing is our quality of life, right? And what we have here. The other aspect is, think about it, we have a higher percentage of high school educated individuals in the population than just about any other state in the United States. That starts there. And then the average number of college graduates that we have per capita is actually fairly high too. So people are coming here, we already have an educated workforce and we already have a willing workforce. So it's no wonder why this is becoming a magnet. COVID just enhanced that, right? It's something we've always known. But there was never that inducement to be able to say, all this stuff that's going on, there's got to be a better place. Because we're all, the tolerance level of urban living was still within some normal acceptable bounds. But that's changed for many companies and many things. That's witnessed by Look what just happened here a little over a month ago with Snowflake. Everybody know what Snowflake is? They're a data company, basically, they're a tech company. I was talking to the CFO before it happened, and he said, well, it's going to be a really interesting time when the address comes out on our proxy statement. And it's got a different address on it than the Bay Area. And lo and behold, when their quarterly statement, or when their proxy statement came out, it said Bozeman, Montana on it. And that shook some people up. Also shook up a lot of people in the sense they're saying, oh, well, they're going to just pick that whole company up and they're going to move it here. Well, that's not the mentality. The mentality is, okay, we're going to start a small office here, and we're going to start growing here, and we're going to grow with Montana. So that's what I talk about when I mean fit. Fit to be able to support us. Fit to be able to support them the way that they want. So we get to choose the fit. Because that's when we start working on whatever the enhancements are and the attractive elements that we want to try to pull them in. That's when you start talking about maybe incentives or something like that. But after we know there's a fit, after we know we can contribute to them and they can contribute to us, then maybe we can talk about enticements. But really, they might not need it. They might need a little bit of help one way or the other, but they might not need it. So keep your powder dry, I guess, is what I'm saying, right? We think we have a lot of money right now. That stuff will disappear in a heartbeat. And who knows? With all the ARPA money, those rules change all the time. So we can't necessarily bank on 100% of that either, right? So because the rules have gone like this and now they're wide open again. But we don't know, it could change in another 2 weeks. So really we'll work with you on that business attraction piece, but that's really the second part of business development we're working with. Third is housing. Housing, we have all the different housing elements. We know that the workforce housing is an issue. There are some basic problems that we have. We have 3 basic problems. One is just the workforce that's available. 2 is workforce housing, and 3 is childcare. So we're not going to be able to solve all of that, but I think there's ways to solve it. We build workforce housing, and we're going to support it somehow. Let's make sure we're going to build 200 apartments or 200 living. Make sure there's a childcare center building put in there. Right? So just things like that we can do to really help make these environments a little bit better, because they're going to have to get done. And there are plenty of people willing to come in and invest and do that. Now, again, we don't have to hand out the money to do that. There's a return on that investment. And so there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines. You look at the whole private equity space and the venture space and everything, there's maybe more money sitting around, plus all of the government money that's floating around. There's more money around than there ever has been before. So unfortunately, decreasing in value relatively rapidly, but still there's more there. And so let's continue to work on that. You know, I can say that we're trying to work on efficiency. Customer service is a big thing that we're really looking at in government as a whole. The ERA program that we've recently put together, we're just crossing over the threshold this week of giving out $10 million so far for rent relief. And the $10 million that's been given out has been done with half the people, and in half the time, we've got $8.5 million out last year. And that, that's due to a lot of hard work on part of the staff and the organization, and how we challenged everybody to say, let's make this simple. Let's make sure that, let's not make them go down and fill out a 20-page form. Let's not make them, it gets done on this, right? Because this is sometimes the only connectivity that someone has. And so I want to say thanks to our housing team. There's nobody here from there, but they did a great job. And continue to make sure if there are people that have issues that you point them in that direction. Last week we have, I'm going to go back to workforce housing, workforce for a second. The Wall Street Journal had an article yesterday. And it basically said there's 3 reasons why there's a workforce shortage. You can agree with this or not, but I thought it was kind of interesting. The first one is supplemental unemployment, right? It was cheaper to stay home or more lucrative to stay home than it was to work. Well, in Montana, we've ended that, but that still doesn't mean it's done forever, right? For everybody. So that's still going to be a pull that keeps people from either relocating or whatever it might be because they have that safety net. Second one is in urban communities, there's still a great fear of COVID. There is a desire of not to get engaged and not to participate in the community because of the density that's there. And then the third reason was childcare. It kind of loops back to that. So those were the 3 reasons that they basically stated that, you know, why we have a workforce shortage. That may be true. The other reason is in Montana, we've exported our kids and our grandkids. Most of us have a great many of us actually, and we should be having you part of the website, have left Montana. I mean, I'm the slow one. It took me 35 years to get back. But we're working on getting Montanans to come back home. So has anybody seen the Come Home Montana campaign? All right, so the anthem video is launched. We've got some other 30-second videos that are going to be coming and doing social media. Certain amount of controversy associated with that because people go, oh yeah, well, yeah, can't come back. It's too darn expensive, you know, to go to the Flathead or go to Galveston County or wherever. There's 54 other counties in Montana. Right? So again, we're one Montana. So I think we have a way to sort of offset some of that, and you know, it is what it is in terms of where housing prices are for those people that live there, that have had their house a long time. Hopefully you can continue to be there and share and benefit from that equity at some point in time. For others, then it doesn't mean that there isn't someplace else to be. And you know, so we just keep reminding, because most of you in this room are not from those areas, right? So at the end of the day, I think that's something we have to remind ourselves. I know I'm over, Steve, but too bad for you. You'll have to figure out a way to wait. Sometimes electronic things are very frustrating. And then last but not least, we have other things that we do. We have tourism. This is a big part of our economy. It's a very big stress point in certain parts of those 2 areas again, not so much in other parts of it. But again, I think that part seems to be calming. We don't see anybody too much complaining and that they've gotten through this, but now it's a matter of the workforce and how that's impacted tourism. So that's a delicate balance right now because not everybody can have, we're basically slowing down our farm season campaign because if you can't come here and find a rental car or can't find a restaurant open or can't get a hotel room, you're going to have a negative experience. Now we're never going back there. That place is so backwards, they can't even get people to work. I mean, who knows what they'll wind up thinking, right? So we're really kind of starting to shift and look at what's the new brand of Montana, because it's the new brand in terms of where we are economically and where we are business development. That image and that message needs to flow over into our tourism side as well. So we're kind of looking at how do we re-identify Montana. It's not just this warm, nice. Thanks, Gloria. That's the 1 minute that I had that Todd left me, right? And so anyway, that's we'll see how that focuses and changes over the next next year or so. But I just, again, want to thank all of you. This has been fun for me in an industry for way too many years, probably. This is my first foray at this, so I don't know what I don't know what I don't know, and maybe sometimes that's good, and maybe sometimes that's not so good. I know that there's people out there like John that I can call and say, hey, John. But I just want to say thank you again, and appreciate your work with One Montana, and let's figure out a way to bring business here and to grow your communities in a way that's beneficial to all of our Montana citizens and really preserves our life. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. One more person I do want to actually point out, kind of going back to All Together and some of our great partners. Jason Riddle, for those of you who are new, MACO and League of Cities and Towns, Montana Association of Counties, Jason is a great partner with us at MEDA. So if you haven't met Jason, meet Jason in the hallway or anything else, because they help us get certain things done. And one thing I do want to point out is if you haven't looked at Mary Krigel's update to our reports, once again, some of these things have already started. One of our items, 1.1.1, leverage Travel Montana's now compelling tourism marketing and advertising campaign. And we have now started the Come Home Montana campaign. So things are starting to move forward. And I think we want to hand it back off to Aidens to show us how to continue that. Excellent.
Right, thank you to everyone. Welcome back. I'm gonna be brief as I can be. We had a good day yesterday, so we're gonna try to make today just as good before it gets too hot and start sweating, because we all did a lot of that yesterday as well, until we left, right? I don't think I sweat at all after I left here. I did a lot when I was here. It was great to hear the whole One Montana bit. It just echoed what we're talking about. We're all in this together. Yesterday we had some fun. We had our spaghetti bridge building contest. We shared some frameworks. We shared how we look at this as a project. We uncovered some things. We kind of pulled some things out of the report. That Mary was so gracious at kind of summarizing and all those things. We pulled some things out, but we also discovered that there were some things that weren't in there, right? Things that were missing. So we often say we want to dot all the I's and cross the T's, but in order to do that, you kind of have to find them all first. That you don't want to skip that step. You got to find them all. And that's what we were doing yesterday. So today, what we're going to do is make an effort to say, okay, we know you guys can't chase after everything. That's impossible. That was one of the speakers earlier said that they had to narrow the focus. Right now, it feels like we got a shotgun. Okay, and I don't know how far the spray will go, but if it hits something, it's just going to irritate it. It won't do what we need it to do. So we need to work through the process and get us a long range rifle, right? And we need to figure out how many bullets we're going to need. Those are the things that we're going to go after. Okay, so I don't know if that's 1 or if it's 10. I have no idea, and that's not our job to do. We don't know that. You all do. You have a lot of experience with it, but it's incumbent on this group to understand, and this is something that the gentleman from the chamber said to us. You can't really expect full-time results with part-time effort. It just doesn't happen. So it's going to take commitment to make these things happen. Focus and commitment. So that's what we're going to try to drive to today. Try to pull some of these things out, prioritize. And again, maybe we will need to get that dissenting opinion in the room. Someone saying, I don't agree with that. We didn't have any of that yesterday. That's okay. Because if everybody agrees, that means we have consensus, and that's what we want. But we don't want silence when we really want to object to what's going on and what's happening and what's being presented. So be encouraged to do that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ben. So I'll come up and
calling audible on our plan. I just briefly want to talk about what we learned from the small group discussion yesterday, kind of talk about that. We're going to do different groups for the remainder of this session leading into break, talk about, answer a couple of questions, and again, come back and have a discussion this afternoon. So I really like the 4 pillars approach, kind of that concept of trying to understand like, hey, you know, Chamber is able to say, these are our pillars, 1, 2, 3, 4. I feel like what I heard yesterday was, what I read last night as I was kind of going through the comments was that was a strong desire from most groups. They wanted to see what those priorities were. They wanted to have the 3 or 4 talking points. They wanted to be able to go and engage legislatures with education. So it's kind of, we're moving towards that. That's what we're going to try and do, a version of that kind of bottoms up approach. And then it'll be kind of up to the executive committee to kind of put the top down lens on it. And somewhere in the middle, we should have a kind of similar thing for MEDA. So before that, I just want to throw it out there. Who made a friend yesterday? Who met someone new? It's not shocking. You guys are the most highly networking individuals I've ever seen in my entire life. I was like, wait, we're used to that, but I was like, this is a whole different level. My goodness. So who learned something new yesterday? Someone, what'd you learn?
I learned more details about some of the challenges that Prospera group is having, and thinking about, which is not the very cradle draft, it's the MEDA draft. What I can contribute to help them specifically as we look at, you know, trying to work with to recruit companies, but also, like the director was saying, make that match so that we're not bringing companies in where there's no workforce or we're stressing out communities, things like that. So knowing individually from the department standpoint what those individual groups are working on, that really helps.
Great.
You think about what we need to do as a department.
Who else?
Sir, I learned, you know, that we're building better bridges between understanding what the needs of the rural communities are and their perspectives and the urban side. You know, they might be tackling the same type of problem, but their perspective and their approach to the solution is different.
Okay. I learned you guys aren't good at building better spaghetti bridges, but bridging that gap is wonderful. Who else? Someone raise your hand. We all learned something, but no one wants to share. Okay. Who made a deal yesterday? How many deals got closed yesterday? Hey, we got 1. That's great. 2. Fantastic. So Adam, you move forward. Again, we're trying to answer a couple questions. I'm going to go through quickly kind of the summary of what we thought was missing in the report. But let's try to break out by group. This is kind of, again, just showing you what you said about yourself. This is what Jermaine and Adam and I called it, the mirror of truth. Truth mirror, just kind of reflecting back to you what you said. Yeah, thank you very much, Mary. All the way down, okay. So there was a lot about education, sharing, informing. The housing came up. There's one here that I did lean in versus, that might have been someone else. Oh yeah, lean in versus support. I'm not sure through 12 what that meant.
Like are we going to lead it or support it?
Lead it or support. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So that's what lead it. Oh, maybe I just can't read. Lean in. Lead it. Okay. So just here's what we said yesterday. These are what a couple of groups had more than one, so that's why there might be a couple listed there. Marketing PR came up in quite a few different ways too. How are we communicating? What kind of materials do we have? How are we getting our story out there? Do we have a common story? All right, Adam, next one, please. This is going to be our committees. So there was a lot of repetitiveness around the legislative support, starting early was mentioned, having it ongoing throughout, maybe with less intensity. But the legislative committee, there seemed to be kind of some support about kind of continuing that, at least to some degree throughout, or at least starting earlier. There's also kind of a movement of no more committees, or a movement of no more committees, but maybe we diversify the existing committees to expand them. It came up. Technology, housing. Again, these are some of the things, and we'll have a poll everywhere, probably coming back from the session about just kind of how we're going to integrate committees, maybe just kind of get everyone's kind of thoughts on that. This is not the most important thing, but it is something worth considering moving forward, because definitely one of the things that kind of came up as another theme was the desire for structure, the desire for clear actions, the desire of understanding what we're doing with this stuff. So that is, people were clamoring for it. There's a couple groups over here. We're definitely talking about yesterday, needing and wanting to get clarity and action and structure on what we do. So, next, please. And then finally, this is just a summary of what was discussed, but what do we need to be ready? You'll see some of the same themes here. Starting earlier, defining our priorities, collaborate with legislatures. I mean, so that was a big one. Making sure that, and it was reinforced by Mr. Osterman too, talking about, or maybe it's Mr. O'Hara, talking about you need to engage the legislature and legislators to make sure that the things that are your priorities don't get lost. You have the relationships built, that's put together. Relationship building really shouldn't be a big deal for this group, but I mean, it's definitely something that was identified. Good. So any thoughts on this? Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
On the committee one, can I just stress a couple things? We don't have to do it all. And like housing has a very active coalition. Childcare has an active, very coalition. There's a lot of stuff on there that I think we should be engaged with. And I'm not saying let's not do it, but let's not committee ourselves to death. And let's not try to do everything when there's people already on the ground doing it. When we talk about collaboration and trying to move forward, well, let's do that looking across the state, right? And who's already doing work that we can support and get engaged with. We often, in my opinion, we oftentimes think, oh, well, we have to do it. There's a lot of people now in this realm of what we're working on. And so we need to figure out who those are and start moving forward and identifying new partners and bringing them to the table where we go there.
It came up in one of the, how do we be ready?
Yeah.
But that came up yesterday, like identifying who the partners are. So exactly who are the coalitions that we need to be a part of. Someone else had a comment.
Yesterday, someone mentioned having liaisons to those groups rather than our own stuff.
Ambassadors maybe was kind of.
Right, liaisons that come back and report. And
just to reinforce what Tracy said, it starts with focus first. That's really what Todd's encouragement. Find the three things, get in that lane, and then make an impact. And so we can't be all things to all. If we focus first, then we can identify who's already doing work there, how do we partner with them, or if we need to create that work, we can create it. So we've got to focus first.
Yes, sir.
And in the end, we are the Montana Economic Developers Association. So we all work on a lot of different things, but our core work is economic opportunity. And I would advocate, when we look at our pillars, we look at the core of economic development, which is business retention and expansion, business startups, and business attraction. We all work in a wide variety of community development stuff, but if we're going to be the Economic Development Association, there's no one else in Montana doing core economic development.
Does that resonate with everyone?
yeah.
I think one of the key things in planning, you can plan and plan and plan, but if you don't have your, it's usually like 30, 60, 90, whatever, however months or however long the timeline. and you're making sure those goals are met, or the things that you're doing have deadlines or timelines. You can talk about it all you want, but if you don't have that structure of when you're gonna revisit or when you're, of your deadlines, that's probably most important.
Yeah, I agree. I think who's doing what by when. That's, like, because that didn't come out of the study, right? That, there was a matrix that came out and it had groups, you need a person in that group. You need a name. Like, you can't call like a committee. I can call Steve. I can't call a committee. I can call Steve and say, Steve, yo, you were supposed to have this done last Friday. What's the status? But can't do that with a group. So that's one of the things that I would encourage and the leadership to develop, to communicate, to put names to actions so that this whole thing, you don't end up in this vicious cycle, this infinity loop of that ends up frustrating everybody because you spend a lot of time.
Did you know I get those calls all the time?
I haven't called you that.
Yeah.
It sounds like you need a function like project manager.
Yes.
In a way, right?
Explaining Gloria's role every second.
I nominate Steve.
This is something, so because I've been out of the MEDA loop for a while, I chose to write the draft. I just wanted to get a sense of it, and I got permission from Stephen to do it. But I think one of the things that's a challenge with MEDA sometimes is there's not a chief assigner, which we don't want, the whole doing stuff. But Jeremy, what are your thoughts about the who part, right? I mean, how do we swim together in lanes, but figure out who's taking on assignments? Because I guess Nicole and I, as the chair of the workforce, we want to do what the group and the whole wants from you, and we want what our committee wants. We also are not in a position to say, well, you have to do it.
So I don't really know the organization well enough to have a recommendation, other than I heard it, city council member one time said, accountability is knowing which person to blame, right? So.
Well, that's always me.
Yeah. Right. So I think that, it is up to, someone needs to raise their hand, or that consensus needs to be made as well, right? Because there needs to be one person whose job it is, at least not full-time job or whatever happens to be, at least their understood role, responsibility to be the appointer in charge, as you call it. Thanks, sir.
I've not been a part of MEDA for as long as many people in the room, but my short-term observation is we don't lack people willing to step up and take things on.
Right.
What seems to be a frustration is people take things on, but then they get halfway to the finish line and a new thing comes up that seems to be a priority, or the direction changes. And I think this first step of agreeing collectively what the top priorities are, so that people know if they're taking the initiative to put energy in, that energy is going to follow through to vision and an outcome. We go a long way to making the rest of this easier, rather than every time we sort of pick a priority, sort of moves and shifts.
Yeah, I mean, this is a room full of leaders, which is amazing. It's also a room full of people who look for and constantly seek opportunity, which is a great strength, but also is probably a great weakness, right? Trying to do everything, like you said, new shiny object or the next thing. Like it's you're constantly looking for things, which is tough because you have to be grounded as well. Paul, I know you had something.
Just echo what Grant said. Maybe frame this in a different way. If we have a set of priorities, whatever that might be, three things, then figure out the structure, then figure out the process. But sometimes it seems like the question was like, what kind of committee should we have? Like, let's figure out the priorities first, then determine the structure.
Can you stand up so everybody can hear better? So if you just stand up,
Want me to say it again?
hear you better, please.
Yeah, we want to see your knees.
For everyone.
Thanks a
who can
lot.
stand up, it's getting lost.
Okay,
Thank you.
set priorities first, then determine the structure to get there.
So we're going to take the next 15 minutes to do some small group stuff. Ask those exact questions. One, what does your small group think priorities should be? This is not 100 things. This is not 10 things. At most 5 things. Then, what are your recommendations on what specifically should be done next? So, I mean, get really detailed, as detailed as you think needs to happen, so that who, by what, who, what, by who, and when.
Who does it my way?
Yeah, there you go. What he said. So, we're gonna do a quick breakout, and I want you to, again, choose people who you don't know. It looks like some people sat in the same place, pointing in this direction. Some people sat in a new location. That's good. So try, I mean, I would say just kind of group with the tables here to kind of keep it close, but if you're too, friendly with the group around you, try and mix it up a little bit.
Yep, 8 to 10 people, it doesn't matter, just get with.
Yeah, and I've got, oh, Sarah, yes.
What are we prioritizing? Are we prioritizing from this wonderful document? Are we prioritizing what we're doing for the next legislative session? Are we prioritizing legislative tasks that are on the ground? Can you give us a little bit more?
How are they different? So, you have to stand up. All right. Yeah. What would you like to prioritize?
I would like everyone to take a look at the executive summary of this really quick and think about our school. And think about where we are now. Keep in mind, when we did this study, it was pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, so things have changed. But really take a look at it and think about your area. But I'm in North Central Montana and with a reservation in an urban area, but I'm also going to think about Pine Valley and Minnesota. So think about how we can move forward with one kind of common goal, but how we deploy is probably going to be different. So, and what we want to see at the end of the day is these programs, is it education programs, is it doing things a little different, and keep in mind a little of the art that's here. That's what I would do. I'm not from the world today, okay, so it's Gloria, but that was my.
Yeah.
So let's keep in mind that the executive summary in the next gen was a study. These implementation components were recommendations to us. So truthfully, but seems like it should work pretty well, is we have a set of recommendations. Shouldn't we just go through them and say, what are we doing to support? What are we getting behind?
That's one tactic. That's one tactic. But there's also stuff that's not in there, as we discussed yesterday.
Right.
So it's your job as professionals and leaders to integrate what you know about the MEDA report, the recommendations, that input, with what we talked about yesterday, the stuff that's missing, the stuff that's come up between then and now. And it's your job to integrate those things, synthesize them, and make priority recommendations, like what are the most important things to you? Is that clear? Is that just simple? And it's not easy. But if it was easy, you wouldn't have Jermaine.
We wouldn't be here.
All right, I have sheets again. Need you to fill out. Please, you said stuff about my handwriting. Most were pretty good handwriting, but be good. All right.
We'll start the report out with the online group, the remote groups. So Adam, if you wouldn't mind having that lead. Start us off, please.
Jermaine, this is Steve Simonson. I'm going to report out on the remote group if you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, we talked about funding economic development and how that flows into education and marketing. I don't know that there was a lot of differentiation between those, but a lot of overlap seemed to be kind of our main theme. The need to get in front of the representation with the legislators for ongoing issues and just kind of constantly follow up on that, as we mentioned yesterday. Regarding the education and the marketing piece, making sure that all the voices are heard, both rural and urban. We did talk quite a bit about areas 9 and 11, which would involve perhaps some one-page talking sheets so that people that weren't familiar with all the legislators outside of their area would have some common themes that we could go to and talk to elected officials about. And then also we talked a little bit about revisiting the TIF legislation that was passed this session and how that's impacted economic development and how we might be able to work with the newly elected legislators moving forward in 2023 to make some changes to that. So those were kind of the top talking points our remote group had.
What is it? I mean, tax and finance. Okay. I need some good people that didn't know. I didn't know. I'm that guy who would laugh at this question. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Which group wants to go next? We didn't have numbers on. All right. Bridget? Mike. There we go. Yeah.
Thank you. So our group really wanted to streamline MEDA. We felt that some of the difficulties that MEDA has had over the years was we were trying to do too much. And you know, this whole idea of like, what's your mission? That some people or some other organizations were overlooking us because we were trying to be too broad. So we were trying to define what is economic development. Where can we take a leadership role? And we focused on 3 areas. We want MEDA to be known for business attraction, leaders in business attraction. Number 2, leaders in business retention and expansion. And number 3, entrepreneurial development. We feel the state doesn't have a leader in those areas, and that is where MEDA can really deliver exceptional value. Now we realize, for example, business retention has a lot to do with workforce and childcare. There are other associations within the state of Montana that we can engage to help solve those other issues. But when it comes to the needs of business and understanding the needs of business, we really feel that MEDA has an exceptional opportunity to drive home that mission. Attraction, retention, entrepreneurial growth. And the next steps is the executive committee consider this notion of really streamlining what MEDA is known for as a next step.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Lexi Hilbrand. I'm the lead center with the Montana SBPC. So our group kind of had 2 priorities that kind of blended together in a way. Our first priority was like who's in charge of this, and we kind of thought Lori already had enough going on. So our suggestion was to create an executive director with also the issue of who pays for that. And that also kind of led into the financial stability of MEDA itself, and keeping who pays for the executive director kind of in its own light. And then our other priority was marketing MEDA / the awareness of MEDA, which tied into creating MEDA pillars, which might already be in the report that we have, but identifying those and making sure that those are the same from everybody that speaks for MEDA. And so our specific next steps, we had quite a few, so I'll make it quick. Our first recommendation is bringing up the conversation at the MEDA membership committee meeting about financial stability of MEDA and creating the executive director position and how that gets paid for. Next is creating a value proposition for MEDA, where the value of MEDA is, and making it a streamlined, what is MEDA's value, and it's the same for everybody who speaks for MEDA. A communication marketing committee to create / identify the streamlined message for what is MEDA, which kind of goes back to that same one earlier. And then Brigida, I hope I didn't butcher that, so sorry. Did I butcher that?
That's one of the hardest names.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's suggested into looking into nonprofit funding sources for capacity building for MEDA, which again kind of ties back into our financial stability. issue.
But I said I'd do that.
She'd take the lead.
Yeah.
She'd take the lead on that, so she offered herself up for that.
We can perfect.
My voice carries. Our group tried to look at things, I apologize. My back. Our group tried to look at things from both a legislative perspective and a policy perspective, knowing that different things that we're going to do might involve legislation at the state or federal level, and then some might involve policy kinds of things that we can talk about. So one of the things we talked about was looking at developing or potentially developing some sort of a program that would incent businesses to automate and primarily look at that from a manufacturing perspective, but knowing that we have the workforce issues and the shortage of workers, is there a program that we could have put in place or leverage MMEC or something like that where we can encourage automation to resolve that? Because what that does is not only help us with the employee shortage, but it also allows us to upskill existing employees and put upward pressure then on wages and things like that. So that was one thing that we looked at from a program perspective. Another thing that we talked about was a focus on soft skill or employability, working on developing some sort of a program that interacts at high school and maybe the trade school or the VOTEX, if you will, in terms of making sure people have the appropriate soft skills and critical thinking abilities as they come into the workforce. And that's something that we could potentially partner with folks at the state or other areas that are already working to a degree in workforce training. And then finally, talk about leveraging or creating programs that would encourage remote work and especially think about, are there programs that promote short-term work visas or things like that? Could we bring in folks from other countries to help us with some of these workforce shortages? I shared a conversation we had. There was a hotel that opened up in the Polson area a couple years ago, and they couldn't get housekeepers. And so what they ended up doing was bringing in a bunch of folks from Polson, or from the Philippines, excuse me, and that ended up being a very successful venture for them. Another example was when Kelly worked in the motel business, they did some short-term visas, if you will, and brought in some folks from Mexico to help them with housekeeping and things like that. And it was very successful. It allowed those people to have a higher standard of living and help solve that workforce issue. So those were some of the things we thought about. And then in regard to those next steps, we thought, okay, first of all, you have to understand what exists today. What programs are out there? What policies do we have to look at, both from a state and federal level? Identify any gaps from what we're trying to achieve versus what's already there, and then identify how we get from A to B. So that's kind of what we were looking at.
Thank you.
Our group had 3 top priorities. First was MEDA as a convener for collaboration and connection, that was really valuable. Helping members help each other and to better serve their communities, and forging rural and urban connections. And it also would entail collaborating with groups focused on housing, childcare, broadband, and other issues that we've identified. Number 2 priority, elevating MEDA's role as a leader in state economic development. Drafting strategic goals for the organization, making sure that MEDA has a seat at the table with elected leaders, and lobbying the legislature for those priorities. And number 3, build economic development programs that support innovation, entrepreneurship, and growth industries. It would involve creating a feedback mechanism on existing programs or potential programs, and then working with the folks who run those programs to make updates or suggestions to the legislature. In terms of next steps recommended, hiring a full-time executive director and or a lobbyist. And second, leveraging local MEDA members for a coordinated legislative outreach in their respective regions or communities.
Sure.
I'll speak loudly. Our group looked at the framework for action that's in the MEDA plan. It has a couple bubbles, and we kind of clarified what we thought were the key goals, core beliefs, key goals that strategic initiatives could fit under. Those 3 goals that MEDA could adopt would be sort of the primary driving force of our focus and efforts. Building communities, strengthening business and entrepreneurship, and workforce. Those would be the core elements that have, in I think our view, sort of clear sense of what the problem is, and recognizing that community development and economic development have to be done together. These issues that we're talking about are very interdependent. Inside, underneath each of those 4 goals could have a very set of focused strategic priorities. So hearing resonated really much, very much from this morning is that, you know, being a mile wide and an inch deep isn't always very effective, but part of the conversation is having a clear set of goals we can communicate to the public. Building communities, strengthening business and entrepreneurship, and workforce are really clear messages. And inside of them or underneath them would be very specific strategic efforts. And some of them could be collaborative efforts, i.e. sort of the housing examples that were brought up, where we're actually just sort of supporting maybe a bigger statewide effort with a lot of partners, or it could be something that's very specific, like a legislative proposal. But that most of the ideas that come around fit underneath one of these key goals. Next steps would be determining those key initiatives. That underneath those goals, where the sort of priority and focus would live.
I'll give me those goals, the 3 things.
Build communities, strengthening business and entrepreneurship, workforce.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Our group gravitated towards the how as opposed to the what. But in terms of priorities, what that how translated into was number 1, hold weight in the legislature, AKA relevancy, and be the kind of people that instead of us inviting people to speak, people should be inviting MEDA representatives to speak at their conferences and their meetings and to consult when they're making decisions and to begin to carry that kind of unspoken authority. Number 2, we want to partner with organizations. Number 3, we want more infrastructure in terms of the administration for MEDA. And number 4, we, when it comes to the 2023 legislature, commit to something, either 90 or 100%, even in some cases if it winds up losing membership. For example, if the consensus was that there was education workforce, focus on that 100%, become the authority on that, become known for what we got done, and thereby become an authority. Even if that winds up being causing some controversy. Specific steps that we would want to take, number 1, would speak to the administration. We would want, as other groups have said, either an executive director, a lobbyist, or a champion of some kind to lead the attack. We would also want to identify a key partnership with the legislature and have someone, a person in particular, who is a champion for MEDA and is our liaison between us and them in order to foster those partnerships. And we would also want to see in order to afford the executive director or lobbyist, we would want to see a little bit more membership fees in order to afford that position and foster independence. And that's about it.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge our group was Russ, Christian, Marissa, Kathleen, Dax, and me. So we started with sort of some fundamental principles we talked about, one of which was this idea that we should lead where we are the experts and sort of the only entity who can take a lead role, or really it's obvious we should take a lead role. Otherwise, really focus on collaboration, partnership, and supporting other groups who can take a lead role, similar to what some other groups talk about. The other is that there are not a lot of entities tasked with really thinking about the long-term health of the state. So really focusing on those core institutional and fundamental changes that we can affect that will have benefits decades from now, not just sort of year-to-year successes. And some of the things that we basically came up with 3 priority areas for us, and we're referring to this updated document in the way that we present them, and that's the order I'll present them, not because we necessarily thought this was the most important order, but really trying to hone in on, we heard from Director Osterman today about this idea of best fit companies. So one way to get at some of that is to really lead the charge in trying to figure out where do we have clusters. So that's 1.1 in our modernized section of our document. Talks about really looking in at where we have clusters and core strengths and where can we really excel as a state and find best fit companies that fit as existing companies who are already here. 1.2, I believe, was our second priority, which is fundamentally about trying to support and really promote a state, thinking of workforce as that talent attraction and talent retention piece. And I think we can nest within that some things that come later in the document, things like housing and childcare, but really focus on them as components of building our workforce and keeping it healthy, strong, and resilient. I mean, as a side note, I think we agreed that that's really a strength that we can bring to a lot of partners in the state. This idea that core goals that they may have had for years, and we can bring the voice of the impacts of the economy, is actually a powerful way to leverage our voice and our expertise and our knowledge in ways that I think can support a lot of partners in accomplishing goals that we see on the horizon. And then third, which is maybe oddly also 1.2, ensure that the state's economic development programs and tools are up to date and really positioned well to strengthen this sort of kind of companies we want to see grow, and the companies here. Nobody else is looking out in the legislature for how those tools are affecting our communities, what we can do to be competitive. And I guess I would just share anecdotally from our experience at Missoula Economic Partnership. I very much appreciate what Director Osterman said today, that companies a lot of times already make a choice that they're going to move, but I can't tell you how many times it has come down to Missoula versus Boise or Missoula versus Bend. And it does at the end of the day matter what we can bring to the table and what's in that pamphlet. And we need to make sure that what's in that pamphlet competes with other states. We need to make sure that what's in that pamphlet sets us apart from other states. And when we're thinking about best fit companies, we want to make sure that what's in that pamphlet fits the companies that we want to see grow and be here. So that's okay.
Hi, I'm Melissa Wanamaker from the Headwaters SPDC. And so our team, we had a very robust conversation. And what we came down to, we thought we really needed to focus on community and economic development. But remember, we're here to serve economic development agencies, not be the economic development organization. We wanted to connect back to our mission and core values. What are we best at? What we are best at is being a hub to connect, educate, inform, network, and do professional development. We definitely brought up lobbyists are increasing political capacity, and there's a lot of concern with going in that direction between funding and policy. So kind of where we aligned is remembering what we're best at. We want to be a liaison to keep our finger on the pulse of all the key areas that matter to economic development. But remembering we don't always have to lead. So look at our agencies, our partners, our members, and make sure that these reports are getting to all the members. Workforce, childcare, entrepreneurship, business attraction, retention, infrastructure, broadband, they're killer, but we don't necessarily have to be the lead, but we have to know what's happening. Align and ID these partners and decide who's driving. So workforce lead might be the chamber. Childcare lead, family connections, housing. We had 3 members in our group that have their fingers on the pulse. They're on the front line of housing and childcare. So remembering that we have this, probably what came out that wasn't completely said is the potential that's not fully tapped in this room is our collective knowledge and our collective reach properly channeled. We decided it might be okay to be an inch deep and a mile wide. That might be our role. And supporting, and we decided it might be okay to be the grease, but not the glue. And we decided the committees are probably in the best place right now to create weighted priorities, action plans, milestones, choose leads and timelines, because they've been studying it, you know, they've been doing the work. So for us to step in and tell them what to do right now is probably maybe not.
Next.
Really weird spot. So let's see, let me just do this. So we actually went through kind of a who, what, why, where, when. The first piece was figuring out the why, which was the vision. And I heard a lot of similar things. What we said in our vision statement, more or less, is economically strong communities across Montana. Our mission, or our what, would be under the 4 pillars of drive new quality job growth, attract new private investment, attract and retain workforce, and invest in entrepreneurship. As far as the how goes, there were kind of 2 main points, one being developing a unified message to use for communications and marketing to the public and for policymakers. I guess under that would be, you know, who does that? Is that a liaison or is that someone else? So I guess under that point, you know, I think what we think is we should assess the organization, MEDA staff and capacity so that we could tackle the priorities listed in those columns. That person should ideally be a strategist, someone in government relations, a delegator, or I like to make superhero analogies into everything. So our Avenger, who's going to avenge economic developers for the state of Montana. And this should happen immediately to begin the steps of how we have this unified comprehensive message and strategy for the legislative session of 2023. Of course, the where would be in one Montana. Maybe that.
Trying to make you not be laugh. Being very.
All right, our group identified that our top priorities that we wanted to lead on would be metrics reform on economic development programs and state loan programs, really related to changing the metrics around job creation, looking at investment. The second top priority that we would lead is do a better job of realizing our partnerships and defining the value that MEDA is providing to those conversations and groups. So for example, if it's childcare, are we bringing those childcare people to MEDA, like within our organization, and then what value are we providing to their mission or to achieve solutions in that work? We also identified some priorities that we thought we would be supportive of and thought of some, that would be housing and workforce housing. And we talked a lot about the different dynamics of what our role could be, like finding capital, maybe it's looking at land trust, maybe it's legislation, but finding our role in that work. And the same type of thing with workforce alignment and coordination, is finding our role and value we provide within that effort. So our specific next steps are getting a MEDA director or manager, growing membership, and having a strong communications and marketing committee that also works hard to share the expertise that are within this group and to external audiences.
I probably don't need this, but I'll use it anyway. I'm losing my voice. So there were 5 of us in the group, and we actually started by discussing what committees and things MEDA has now. Realizing they don't even know some of the framework because they're newer of the previous. So we went really quick through the executive summary. So we didn't get a lot on here, but there was a lot of really, really great discussion. It was wonderful. The first thing we did talk about is communication and collaboration. We all do amazing things, but we don't know what each other are doing. And along with that is industry-driven strategies, really taking a look at how to do that with a directory, maybe adding a couple lines on our MEDA directory of what you're an expert in so that we can reach out, and we don't like to reinvent the wheel. We're really good at borrowing information from everyone. Well, we should be using others' intellect too, to really make this a huge effort. Strengthening each member individually and collectively so that, you know, Eastern Montana knows what Western Montana is doing, and more importantly, Western Montana knows what everyone in Eastern Montana is doing as well. The next was to delegate specific people for specific tasks. Having one person or 2 people that do this, that get that information back out to the membership. Let's see. I didn't write this and I was not supposed to be talking, so I apologize. That strengthen our public and private partnerships. It has done a really good job of that over the last 5 years. If you look around, there's a lot of industry in the room. It isn't just those of us in economic development with that information behind our name, but actually working on, when we're working on projects, where we're working on initiatives, when we're doing some of those workforce training, and workforce is big. If we don't know what industry is doing and what is needed on the ground, how are we going to help? So really strengthening a lot of those, and that goes along with our partnerships, goes along with the Montana Infrastructure Coalition, League of Cities and Towns, NACO, Contractors Association, Bakers Association, all of those, and really making sure that we're a part of that as well. Okay, so if you talk to me at all, this has been my idea all week. Oh, we talked about it and we thought it was a good way for communication, but create weekly newsletters with information on it. 1 week from individuals across the state, which you're working on. The next week, what the committees are doing, because our committees meet monthly and sometimes bi-monthly, and legislative has been weekly and bi-weekly. Actually sending out 3 sentences in a constant contact newsletter that's done to all of the membership. So even if you don't open that, which we want everyone to open the newsletters to get those click-through numbers, but even if you just review it, you know what's going on in MEDA, and you don't have that disconnect from those of us who are intrinsically involved to those that just really don't have time sometimes even to go to the website. Designate liaisons from MEDA to other associations, organizations, and the Department of Commerce so that we can have those conversations, as the director was talking about, not just with the Department of Commerce, but other departments as well. We've done a really good job with the Montana Infrastructure Coalition. For those of you who don't know, we have members on the board. We've done a great job. Jason's done a stellar job with MACO. We've had great conversations with League and Tim Burton, and thank you, Steve, and others on that. But we need to be out there and reaching out more. I know it's easy to sit back and just let people send this information and do that, but if each of us take 5 minutes to talk to someone that we know in that realm, we have a lot of engineers
and some architects here in the room, and they have associations too. So it's bringing that collaboration totally back together. And then we looked at the economic development programming. Like, who's gonna take a look at programs in the state? The state handles that. But if the executive committee and maybe the chairs of each of the other committees could be those people that take a look at it for each of their committees and really have those conversations, I think we'd come out with a better product. So that's what we have.
We heard some good stuff, some really, really good stuff. Stuff that I hadn't heard before. Maybe stuff that you guys hadn't thought about. You know, like the concept of maybe it's okay to be an inch deep in a mile wide. Because you all are great networkers, you know, and you have your hand in everything, but you can't do everything. Right? So maybe that's a good idea. To say, okay, let's touch this, let's touch that, and what do we need to be in charge of, right? What does MEDA need to carry versus assist with? You know, and that's just a fundamental thing of this organization. Under some leadership, we heard this quite a few times. Under proper leadership and under someone that's focused on it all the time, you know, you guys could really come up with some awesome stuff because you already have. Right? And then consensus becomes quite an easy thing to do when you're just kind of assisting. You know, when you're the point guard, you don't have to score all the points. You can just kind of dish it out. It becomes a little bit easier than trying to do everything, right? So what's the role? Right? Where do we want to be? Where do we want to be positioned in the state? We want to be experts at question, right? You know, if we're an expert at making the connection, we're experts at getting things done, ensuring that things get done the right way, with the right focus, the right people, that efforts aren't done in vain, and that things are done as efficiently and as effectively as possible, which may mean, as the young lady said, hey, the chambers work for us. So let's work with the chamber. Let's see what we can do to help them with workforce. Housing, what can we do to help them with housing? Childcare, what kind of assistance do the experts in childcare need from this organization? You know, so it's a little bit of a different spin, but it's a significantly different way of going about doing the thing, doing MEDA's business. Right. So that's what I heard. I heard that maybe we take five, step back for a little bit, reflect on it, really say, like what the gentleman said this morning, what is MEDA excellent at? You know, I think you're excellent connectors, you're excellent networkers for sure. Best I've come across in quite a while. So I think we leverage that. You know, we got to figure out what that one thing that MEDA's really great at, and that's what you should keep, and you stay there. That's the lane. Yes. Right.
Part of our conversation was the fact that the next gen analysis was a study about the competitiveness of Montana compared to national metrics competitor states. It wasn't necessarily intended to be a strategic plan for MEDA. It was intended to identify actions that would make Montana more competitive, not necessarily actions that MEDA had to lead. And some of us weren't in on the front end of the next gen project, so it wasn't real clear. And maybe there's even some differences of opinions about that. But each of us, depending on
the community or the organization we serve have to be experts in different areas. Some of us have to be more experts in housing than others. Some of us have to be more experts in entrepreneurship than others. Some of us have to be experts in workforce more than others. But the value of this organization is we can share and learn from each other and bring in speakers who can talk about what's working, what isn't working in other places. And so our feeling was, are we really intended as our mission goals, MEDA's mission goals, are we intended to be the lead as an economic developer? Or are we just here to support all the economic developers in the room?
Question.
And just as a professional development organization, I guess I'd like to hear maybe from Steve or some people who are in on the front end of the next gen, because it really isn't a strategic plan document. It's an analysis with some recommendations. And we're trying to, it feels like we're trying to sort of make it into a strategic plan, but I'm not sure that's the direction we should be taking.
Responses?
Yes, I got called out.
Sorry.
Remember the multiple choice question and item E was, we did this just so Steve could make everybody feel bad about it. It really wasn't that way. In fact, just listening to everybody today, I love taking notes. And I thought, how would I now characterize the next gen analysis? It was a tool to give us a fresh perspective, right? Because we were working in a place that was informed by the way we've been doing things for 20 years. And so we all thought, I believe, we thought together, it's time to maybe re-educate ourselves. We're so busy in the day-to-day stuff, you don't often get the space to take a pause and say, is that still making the impact I needed to make, or is it just the same thing I've been doing for 10 years? So the words I wrote down today as I listened to all of you talk was a fresh perspective. It is a tool that gives us a fresh perspective on how we can be impactful in the work that we do. I've been with MEDA for a while, and this is one of the fresh kind of let's talk out loud about who we are and what we do conversations that we've had in a long time. I'm really proud of the group and the way that we've had this discussion. But that's how I would view that analysis. When the analysis came out, I said, there's good ideas here. We're actually going to run with one of those ideas. And we spent our own money as an organization trying to advocate for legislation because we thought it fit well with the needs in our community, and it fit well, we thought, in a broader context, it was related to a tax credit for entrepreneurship or for angel investing in Montana. Which many, I don't want to sell you on that, but many states across the country are doing that. That's that whole, let's have a modern perspective on things. So I never viewed it as this is our strategic priority. This should inform our strategic priorities as an organization. So if we do the analysis and when you want to ignore it, shame on us. Because we spent a lot of time talking together to build that. But in and of itself, it's not the strategy. We need to come up with that, pick the 2 or 3 core areas as Paul described, and say, now let's go to work on better equipping the men and women who are doing economic development across the state of Montana so they can make a better impact on their job. So just, Brian, I don't know if you have other thoughts on
that. I would actually just reiterate that. We did things very structurally, very specifically, and I know I've already had people say, do not say that, but I'm going to say it anyways, Rick. Part of the reason why we didn't openly go directly to the Department of Commerce and have them fund this is because we wanted to make sure this was us talking about what we should be doing and in comparison to our neighbors. It really was trying to be very clear about what do we see as MEDA as our comparison with other states. And then we did not want to have a consultant come in and say, but these are your strategic plans. We wanted to come to this kind of type meeting. And then the pandemic hit in the middle of it and life got in front of all of us. But I do think this is that philosophical moment. We need to be thinking about who we are, what do we do well, how do we move the dial? Because I think, again, going back to conversations with Russ, we focus on how do we get the shit done. So now, how do we get there? How do we move forward?
Oh, you got some? Oh, you don't need the mic.
No, I don't think I need the mic. I recall, I don't remember when it was, all of, we start that conversation. You're at Fairmont. It was a couple of years ago. And part of the conversation that really struck with me was that's where there was that push and pull or sort of heavy conversation of taking MEDA to the next level, if you will, or like being more relevant. And that was sort of the impetus to the study, and I'd sort of echo Steve's comment. It wasn't to like write a strategic plan, it was to give us information, but it was very intentional, at least for most of us that were in that room, that this was like a new endeavor for me to sort of go this next level. And I don't think MEDA stops being the networking and the peer relationships and sort of that trade association for us that are frontline economic developers. But this is this like other piece of, are we going to be leaders and find that specialty? So we're going through a little bit of that identity crisis of like, what is that? Because we've done, there's 20 years of history on the networking and the learning and the education and the partnership side. This is a little bit different when are we going to advocate and build some strategic effort around some kind of change or updating of a program or whatever. So that was a little bit of the history, and it took a while. It wasn't just, I mean, I think we spent almost a year or 9 months just getting the study funded and planned before we ever started it.
Not to scare you, but to be honest with you, I think we should be doing this kind of introspective work and analysis every year. Are we doing the right things? Are we making an impact? What's happening in the world around us? And we do that organizationally, right? And successful businesses do that constantly. And so we can't afford to not be having this kind of evaluation of the tools and resources that are really making an impact on an ongoing basis. So who's with me to fund the next gen analysis? Nobody's. Thank you. There's one. Well, that was a staff person. So. That'll go well under. No, they are not.
You all, Sarah, you have anything, Rich?
Okay, with Dr. Mike, I'll speak up. Just really briefly. I agree with what Steve said and Paul. I think that the next gen did exactly what it was intended to do. It gave me this something to share, to get behind, to advocate for, particularly progress. But I did exactly what it was intended to do. It was my experience, since I've been a member, it was like the first big thing that NEDA did. Shared and they were proud of, and that it was used to try to further economic development in the state. So I'm really proud of that. And I think it was a big success. I do think that the organization is at a bit of a crossroads in terms of what it wants to be. These growing pains aren't, and none of this is critical, right? This is just what happens in organizations that evolve over time when the needs change. So I would support NEDA having more involved, being more of a leader, stepping out more than they do now. And I realize that comes with some opportunities for criticism. So be it. That's the world we live in. I work in the city of Bozeman. We get criticized all the time. That's the nature of the system that we work in. So if you don't, if your skin isn't thick enough, then don't get out front, right? Maybe do some other bits and pieces. But the point is that I think MEDA is at a crossroads to evolve itself into something great. something on par with the other leaders in statewide organizations in this realm, right? Eagle Cities and Makos and others, right? Elevating this organization so that you guys get invited to profess our expertise and their needs. That's what I think we should be striving for. So, and that's what I would be supporting. Thank you.
So I made the statement before we broke into groups that we're the Montana Economic Developers Association and we should stick with economic development. And every single group came back and said, that's not realistic today. We're also doing a wide variety of community development work. So I'll make my pitch, and some of you who have been around a while know I've made it many times, but I'll put a twist on it. We should change our name to the Montana Community and Economic Development Association. And I'm saying not developers, but development, because we can't do it alone. We need a stronger organization that brings in all of the partners that we work with on the local and regional and state level. We need a strong association. If we're going to have more professional staff support, whether it be for lobbying or organization or what have you, we need to substantially grow our membership in order to fund that. Those of you who know the finances of MEDA, we are overly dependent on a fantastic no bid discretionary contract with the Montana Department of Commerce. So Scott Osterman, thank you. If that got pulled out, we'd be sunk. If we built a strong organization, as far as I know, there is not a community development association in Montana, and that is needed. There's a land use planning chapter of APA. There are certainly CDFIs, but I'm not aware of any state association that's dealing with all of the broad things. You have a housing group, you have a childcare group, you have healthcare groups, but community development brings it all in. It goes back. I was taught community economic development, that they were one and the same. They weren't separate. So that would be my pitch.
Aha. You said my name. So.
We want to hear you.
No, you.
Yes, you
Thank you. So I agree with Brett.
Wow.
About collaboration, communication, consensus. I am not drinking. In my very small, like 3 times larger organization, we do community development. Brett does downtown community development. Rick does it with Northwestern Energy. Economic development starts on Main Street and grows from there. This analysis just proved that we needed an analysis. And there's stuff in here I hate. We all do. But as a term that my grandmother used to use, you don't throw the baby out with bathwater. You just work around and figure out what you can do, what you want to do. And each of us are going to have different preferences. But if we can get an overall voice, a great direction, then I think it will be amazing. Montana is at a point where we don't know what to do with ourselves. We have housing needs, we have workforce needs, we have money needs, we have a drought, which we can't do anything about it, but for those in eastern Montana and those 8 places, you're gonna get hit twice as hard as anyone else. We can't fix the weather, but we can darn sure try to fix what we can on the ground. I challenge everyone to actually read this report. Because Steve and I may have quite a bit, and I kind of am on my soapbox now, but I watched this all weekend, and the people in this room and the people online and the people that can't be here, These are true leaders in our state if you truly, truly look at all of the work that we accomplished. We had great people come and speak. Todd's not here anymore, I don't think, but we have great collaboration and we need to capitalize on it. We need to capitalize on it for our urban areas. We need to capitalize on it for our rural areas and make sure that everyone has a voice and is represented. I loved hearing all of this. It's what I've been waiting for a year. As I was one of those with Tony, Paul, and Steve that sat in a room at Fairmont and actually wrote up the very, very, very draft RFP of this. So if you truly hate it, you can blame me. I'll take all of that. But I think this is something that we can learn and grow. And Gloria is going to need some help herding all of these cats. So Brian, I'm taking my 1 minute now that's turned into 5. So first of all, thank you everyone for coming and being a part and believing in MEDA or in the Montana Community and Economic Development Association. I'm actually a member through MACO because of Jason of the MACO Community Economic Development and Labor Committee. And we talk about everything that we do here with the counties too. So thank you all very much. And I'll sit down and be quiet now.
I would just make a suggestion, Montana Business and Community Development. I really think, and I know I'm kind of an outsider looking in as I'm so new, but there is a lack, when you look at Montana, there's not enough advocacy for the businesses. And it's just, again, I'm just going to point broad consensus from my group. Everything is going to derive from business attraction, business retention, and entrepreneur development. A lot of those needs are going to drive these other partnerships. So I just strongly urge everyone to really streamline the mission. I'm not saying we're not going to get involved in the other things like housing and childcare, but really streamline those missions to those 3 top areas. I think it's just going to serve Montana very well in the future. That's my thoughts.
Anyone else? All right, thanks everyone. You know, I've been incredibly impressed by you all. We went in the direction that this thing needed to go. Yeah, you don't. I don't. Sure. Everybody knows I don't need a microphone. Oh, yeah. Everybody wishes you didn't have one. Thank you.
I just want to let you know, I've sent out several things and I've really been amazed. I had talks with a lot of people. By the way, those of you who don't know me, I'm Russ Fletcher. I send out emails. I had a lot of discussions with people, and one of the concerns that they had was, and it's the reason I started Matter in the first place, was that, you know, most of them didn't know what was going on in Great Falls and didn't talk to Helena, and we just had this failure to communicate. So one of the things that I have built, and I hope you're going to take advantage of, is the Montana Communities Map. And I'm asking anyone who wants to be a keeper of a city. And all you're required to do is simply put down the information about that community. What's happening? What's the broadband speed? What's the availability? What's the real estate? What new events are happening, etc. It'll be a single place where anyone can go and learn about any of our communities in Montana. It's mostly free. It's you know, a couple $100 if you're, you know, big city. So I spent a lot of money building it, but I hope you'll take advantage of it. I think it's going to be something that we can be really proud of and will help with the communication, with the information flow, because information is power. And in this room, there's a huge amount of information. We just may not communicate it with each other as well as we could. End of advertising. Thank you.
In an effort not to go over, I will say this. You know, I was telling my colleagues that this is called the last best place, right? Yep. That's Montana. We all have a part in that. Now, what we do going forward will help to keep this the last best place. So that's the challenge that I put for all of you, whatever it is, because we're at a crossroads. That's what I see from where we are. We're at a crossroads right now. So we probably won't do the word cloud, but we can. We're at a crossroads right now.
As you're talking, people, so this is the word cloud.
Word cloud.
Pull everywhere.
Yeah, pull everywhere. You can just, this is just to say like what makes this the last best place, because most people have never heard Montana's the last best place. Anyway, at a crossroads, what does this organization want to be moving forward? How do you want to be recognized? What types of activities do you want to be engaged in? Where do you want to be positioned within that activity? At the front, beside it, propping it up? Where do you want to be? That's the challenge that's in front of you. And the study just opened that box. That's the way I see it. I read it more times than I care to admit. And each time that I read it, I came closer and closer to the conclusion that this is a great conversation starter. This is going to get the conversation going, but it can't be the end. Can't be. You can't get recommendations from a consultant, from myself or someone who does the things that I do, come in, do an analysis, give you recommendations. You say, okay, cool. You don't live here. You know, you don't move like the people here move. You don't know the rhythm. You don't feel the heartbeat of the place when you just come in, you do your thing, and then you exit. You gotta live it. You gotta breathe it. And that's what you all do. So just quickly, what makes this the last best place? Just say a word or two. What makes it what it is? And what's gonna keep it that way? I think it's the people. It's the place, it's the recreation, it's the fun, it's the passion that you all have for one another, for life, for liberty. That's Montana. You don't want nobody messing with your guns. You don't want nobody telling you what you can and can't do. You know, that's Montana. Leave us the hell alone. You're here. We got this, right? We can take care of each other. And I learned that during COVID. My neighbors were phenomenal. And I'll tell y'all, when I showed up to town, when we moved here, this is a little story, a quick one. When we moved here, my wife moved us up from Denver. Right? She moved us, I was in Bahrain, in the Middle East. I showed up about a week later. And so, of course, didn't know anyone, didn't even know someone who knew someone. It was right around the 4th of July. And this is one of those places where you can't just put shrubs and bushes and stuff that you cut on the curb and they pick it up, right? You got to take it off somewhere. Don't have a truck. So neighbor, I never met, walks over. And I don't know if he was basically trying to tell me to clean my shit up or what. He walks over. I just violated my no cussing. So he walks over and hands me his keys to his truck. And he said, we're going to a concert up at Big Sky. He said, we'll probably be gone when you get back. So just put the keys on the table. I was like, these are the keys of your truck. He said, yeah. I said, table, what table? He was like, just inside the door. I was like, the door to what? He's like, the door to the house. I was like, so let me get this straight. So you're giving your keys to your truck to me. We just met. You want me to put them inside your house? I was like, it's just gonna be a lock? He's like, yeah. I was like, y'all special. That's one tap. And that's what. We'll synthesize all of this. And there'll be a path forward and all that stuff. Now we'll get it back.
Excellent. So again, I want to thank everybody. I do want to make one real big clarity issue here. I was taking an old list for our sponsors. I do want to make sure that I call out Brigitte with World Trade Center and the Montana Bioscience Cluster Initiative. I just had my old list and I'm old and
Now you understand why I was going.
I was thinking you're going, what did I do here? So, Joe, are you gonna come down and do a little bit here? I do want to make sure everybody understands that, well, we're gonna have Sarah up first, right?
Sure.
Sure, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that the executive group here, Joe is the vice president, myself, Steve is the past president. Tori is not here today, she's ill. We got Rick and Sarah, that's our executive committee right now. I think you're supposed to. Oh, you're good, okay.
So did everyone enjoy this? Well, for being here and braving the lack of air conditioning. The demands were great. Thank you, Gloria, as always. I would like to take this moment to have Jermaine and Ben come down. Over. Yeah. Oh, look it. Brought him in. He's trying to get through. And we had one for Adam, but COVID. Thank you so much for herding cats, for being here, for having the conversations that you have, the patience that you have, dealing with, all of our chaoticness. And we look forward to the finished product and continuation. So these are just little thank yous from the Montana Economic Development and Community Association. So thank you. And here's one for Adam, so you be able to grace us again. Thank you. And now, Joe gets ladies and gentlemen, Joe gets the fun part. He is handing out door prizes.
Thank you, Sarah, and I'll echo the same sentiments of thank you so much for everyone coming. It was so nice to actually see people in person. I'm super proud of the work we accomplished. I know one of the things we set out at the beginning was to set our differences aside and work together for the state, and that certainly happened in this room. And it was damn nice to be able to walk into the hallway and actually just go talk to someone that you've only seen on Zoom for the last 18 months. So I've got my Vanna White with me to help out with our prizes. So Gloria already pulled the names out of the hat. We've got, I believe, 5 or 6 of them. So the first one is Mary Craigle. The man who gets no shortage of criticism from his own words, Britt Fontenelle. My future sister city partner, Jim.
You should tell him.
Which community?
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's a big test.
Jim Atchison from Southeastern Montana Economic Development District, more importantly, Colstrip.
Well, the challenge is this one. Andy Beggar.
Have to tell us where you're from.
Where are you from, Andy? From Richmond, Montana. All right. Mr. Patty Fleming from MMEC. And from Cushing Terrell, Tony Schneider.
Formerly known as.
Thank you.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, is
You're gonna drink that? So
Yep, not yet. That's what the executive committee's for, right? Ross Hoyle.
He wasn't here today. I get it.
Cool. Thank you.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right, well, this has been a great couple days. Thank you all for all of your participation. This is not the end, this is the beginning. And, you know, we need to continue this moving forward. There's a lot of work to do between now and the fall conference. And remember, if you haven't signed the poster or the banner, make sure you sign it because we're in this together. Please drive safe, have fun, be careful on the 4th of July.
Hey, Rick.
Yes, Patty.
That's the one thing. If anybody's interested in being on the MEDA board, just let me know.
All right, hopefully everybody heard that. If you're interested in being on the MEDA board, Patty's taking nominations. Brett?
Can you say where the board meeting is and we start at
Board meeting is over in the same room that we had lunch yesterday, and we will get started probably maybe by 11:45-ish. If that works. I know you have to leave, so.
Stuff done.
Yeah. So we're, you know, just in conclusion, somebody once told me when you leave these meetings, you can be a leader, you can be a follower, you can say a prayer, you can light a candle, or you gotta get the hell out of the way. So let's move this thing forward.
That are not members of MEDA, we would certainly enjoy you to become members of MEDA. So if you would like the information, either talk to Gloria, hit me up. We'd love to welcome you to all of our conversations.
Join now, because after the board meeting, the price is gonna go way up.
Again, and thank you to everybody who is new. I think that having new faces, that's a big deal. And then once again, just to make sure a hybrid conference comes together, Gloria and Mike, without you, we would be boiling in here. So again,